You need to watch this if you crave chills down your spine. Welcome to Soul Studios. Here, true crime meets the unknown. Suspense lurks in every shadow, and supernatural forces whisper from the dark. We craft chilling, edge-of-your-seat short stories inspired by the eerie, the unexplained, and the most haunting mysteries. 3 new stories drop every week, each one darker than the last. Are you ready to step inside? Subscribe now before the next story finds you.
In 2025, an anonymous recording surfaced, a bone-chilling confession from an NYPD officer who spent nearly 2 decades upholding the law before secretly turning into one of the most terrifying vigilante killers the city had ever seen. His victims? Some of the worst criminals who slipped through the cracks of the justice system. His signature? A length of blue paracord, and a joker card left on every body. But buried inside this confession is a devastating truth. One mistake so haunting, it shattered everything he believed he was fighting for. This story isn't about a hero or a villain. It's about the thin line between them, and how easy it is to cross. If you love true crime stories that feel almost too chilling to be real, hidden confessions, and dark psychological unravelings, hit subscribe to Soul Studios now, because the next story we tell might just reveal the monster hiding behind the badge. I am so tired. Tired of the secrets, tired of the lies, tired of carrying the weight of what I've done. My name is Eric Vega, and for the last 18 years I have worn the badge of the NYPD. I swore to protect and serve, to uphold justice. But justice became a joke, a twisted game that I could no longer play by the rules. If you're listening to this, then I'm finally telling the truth. For years, a part of me has been dying under the weight of this burden. Every time I close my eyes, I see their faces. The guilty ones I punished, the innocents I failed. The darkness inside me has grown too heavy to bear, and the line between hero and monster has blurred into nothing. I don't expect forgiveness. I'm not even sure I deserve understanding. But I need to confess. I need to unload the truth before it's too late. I wasn't always this broken thing speaking in the dark. 18 years ago, I was a young man full of hope, full of fire and idealism. I remember the exact day I got my badge. I remember how the metal shield felt cold and heavy in my palm the first time I pinned it to my uniform, heavy with responsibility, but also shining with promise. I joined the NYPD because I believed in justice, because I wanted to make a difference in a city that raised me on tales of heroes in blue. Those early days, I patrolled the streets with pride. I'll never forget my first arrest, a mugger who had ripped a purse from an elderly woman. I caught him in a dead-end alley. My heart was pounding, adrenaline surging, but I got him in cuffs. The look of gratitude in that grandmother's eyes as I returned her purse, I held on to that like a beacon. I thought, this is what it's all about, protecting the vulnerable, being the good guy. I was naive, maybe, but I had faith. In the academy, they told us we'd be the thin blue line between order and chaos. I believed it. I believed in the law, in the system that backed it. I looked up to the veteran officers, men and women who had given their lives to these streets. I wanted to be like them. On those long night shifts, walking a beat in Brooklyn, I would look out over the city lights and feel a swell of pride, thinking I was part of something honorable, something bigger than myself. Back then, my moral compass was uncompromising. There were good people and bad people, and I was there to stop the bad. Simple. Clear. I wish it had stayed that simple. It started with little things. Things I brushed off at first. A sliver of doubt here, a moment of frustration there. The cracks in my faith in the system were small, but once you notice one, you start seeing them everywhere. I remember an early case that troubled me. A store owner beaten half to death during a robbery. We caught the guy, a repeat offender high on something, covered in the victim's blood. It should have been an open and shut case. I sat in the courtroom on my day off, wanting to see justice done. Instead, I watched a slick defense attorney tear apart our arrest on a technicality. The security camera footage was thrown out over some bureaucratic warrant issue. They let that monster walk. The victim's family was in tears, and I felt something crack inside me. How could this be justice? I told myself it was an exception, a fluke. We did our job, but the courts failed. It happens, my partner said. Don't let it get to you, Vega. We did our part. So I swallowed my anger, but it got harder to swallow each time. Then there was the Solomon case. I still see her face at night sometimes. A 13-year-old girl, Maria, gunned down in the crossfire of a gang shootout. We all knew who did it. Witnesses pointed to a local gangbanger named Luis Spade Ortiz. I spent days tracking him through alleys and tenements. We finally hauled him in. I remember staring at Ortiz across the interrogation table, my fists balled under the metal surface as he smirked and played innocent. We had a witness ready to ID him. I thought justice would be served for Maria's grieving mother. But that witness, a terrified kid from the block, recanted on the stand. I'll never forget Ortiz's grin when the not guilty verdict was read. He walked out of court a free man while a mother's cries echoed in the halls of justice. The system, once again, had failed. I felt the crack in me spread a little more. And then it got personal. My partner, his name was Daniel Reyes, and I were responding to a domestic disturbance call in Harlem. Routine. We'd done it 100 times. But that night, everything went wrong. The suspect, a guy with a history of assault, was supposed to be unarmed according to the dispatcher. He wasn't. He pulled a gun the moment we walked through the door. Daniel never even got his weapon out. 1 second he was behind me, the next he was on the floor, red blooming on his chest. I returned fire and dropped the suspect, but it was too late. Daniel died in my arms, choking on his blood while I screamed for backup. The man who killed my partner, by some miracle, survived his wounds. I thought, at least he'll face justice for what he did. I sat through that trial too, Daniel's widow holding our hands in the gallery. It was open and shut, until it wasn't. There was an issue with the warrant for the arrest. Something about jurisdiction and a paperwork error because he fled across city lines before we caught him. The evidence of the gun was deemed inadmissible. A cop killer walked free on a damn technicality. The roar in my ears when that verdict came down, I nearly charged at him right there in the courtroom. It took 3 other officers to hold me back. That day, something inside me broke, clean through. Night after night, I lay awake, hearing Daniel's last gasps. I started to realize the system was broken. The cracks had become a chasm. Criminals laughed at us. They knew how to game the system, or had lawyers who did. And sometimes even the people on our side were part of the rot. I'd seen my share of dirty cops getting payouts to lose evidence or look the other way. We wore the same uniform, but some of them were just as much monsters as the thugs in the street. Each time I tried to do things the right way, I was slapped down by red tape, corruption, or pure cowardice. Eventually you start to ask yourself, what's the point of having laws if the guilty slip through? What do you do when the whole structure of justice is rigged, when the good guys' hands are tied and the bad guys run free? There is only so much a man can take before he reaches his breaking point. Mine came a year after Daniel's death. I was hanging on by a thread, burying my rage under work, trying to pretend I could still make a difference within the rules. But then came the Harris case. Jonathan Harris, remember that name? A predator in a business suit. He was a well-connected real estate developer, the kind of guy who donated to the right politicians, the kind of guy who thought he was untouchable. Harris had been accused of assaulting several women over the years. The stories were all the same. He'd lure them under the guise of job interviews or networking, then force himself on them. But none of the charges stuck. Money and influence bought silence or acquittal. Until one brave woman, a young waitress named Elena, came forward after he brutally beat and raped her in a parking garage. I was one of the detectives on that case. I saw the photos of Elena's injuries, heard her trembling voice identifying him. We had DNA evidence, witnesses who saw him leave the scene. This time, I thought, we had him dead to rights. I remember watching Harris during the trial. He was so smug, so sure of his immunity, and damned if he wasn't right. His lawyers shredded Elena on the stand, dragged her character through the mud. Some procedural misstep got the DNA evidence tossed out. Contaminated sample, the lab tech said. Bullshit. I knew some strings had been pulled, and just like that, Harris walked. He even had the audacity to wink at me as he strolled out of court, a free man. That night, I smashed a hole in my living room wall. I couldn't contain the fury, the impotence I felt. Elena tried to end her life a week after the trial. She survived, barely, but something in her died, and something in me snapped. I was done watching the guilty thrive while the innocent suffered, done upholding a law that failed to uphold justice. I realized the law could only go so far. If the system couldn't bring justice, maybe I could. That thought wormed its way into my brain and took hold. I knew it was wrong. Everything I stood for as a cop screamed against it, but my righteous anger drowned out that voice. All I could think about was Daniel's blood on the floor, Maria's mother crying, Elena's broken stare, and all those smug faces of the monsters who got away. It wasn't an impulsive decision. No, it was cold, deliberate. I planned for weeks, wrestling with myself every single day. Part of me was terrified, not of getting caught, but of crossing that line. The line you can't ever uncross. The other part of me felt like I'd been standing on that line for years, and maybe I'd already crossed it in my heart without admitting it. Late one night, I found myself at my desk in my small apartment, an empty bottle of whiskey beside me, looking at case files. Harris's face smiled at me from a mugshot. Next to it was a photo of Elena's battered face in the hospital. My vision blurred with tears of rage. If I did nothing, men like Harris would keep walking. They would keep hurting people. That was the moment I decided. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out a length of blue paracord. Funny, I always kept it from my academy days, a reminder of some long-ago training exercise. Strong, reliable rope. The colour of the uniform I once took so much pride in. I slid it through my hands, feeling its strength. In that moment, it felt like I was holding a lifeline. Not for me, but for justice, for the city, for the victims. A lifeline outside the broken system. Harris became my first target. My first victim. It feels strange calling him a victim. He was anything but innocent. But I suppose at my hands, that's what he was. I spent nights tailing him after the trial. I learned his routines, the penthouse he retreated to, the bars where he drank with other snakes in suits. I was careful, always off duty, untraceable. I wore a hoodie over my face, traded my car with a friend upstate for a while so no one would spot my usual cruiser. My heart was ice when I watched him. Part of me couldn't believe what I was doing. The other part felt justified, righteous even. One humid summer night, I followed Harris from a high-end lounge downtown. He'd had a few drinks. I could tell by his loose swagger that he thought he was invincible. I shadowed him into the parking garage, the same one where he hurt Elena. It was nearly empty at that hour, just distant traffic noise and flickering fluorescent lights. My pulse was surprisingly steady. When he reached his car, I made my move. In a blur, I was on him, slamming the garage door shut, so our confrontation stayed between us and the concrete walls. His eyes went wide as he recognized me under the low light. "You," he breathed, disbelief turning into a sneer. He actually laughed, like I was a joke. "You can't touch me, cop. You know that." That's what he said to me. I didn't say a word. I think something in my silence finally scared him. He fumbled for his phone, maybe to call his lawyer, maybe 911. I cracked him across the face with my off-duty revolver. He went down hard, blood erupting from his nose. Before he could scream, I was on top of him with the paracord. I wrapped that blue rope around his throat, hands trembling but determined, and I pulled. Harris fought. He was younger than me, stronger than he looked. He thrashed and kicked, the cord cutting into my gloved hands. For a moment, he nearly threw me off. My mind flashed to Daniel, to Elena, to that smug wink. I roared from somewhere deep in my chest and tightened my grip. We struggled in the dark, scuffling feet echoing. His nails clawed at the ground, at my arms. He gurgled and choked as I used every ounce of strength and fury in me. It felt like an eternity, but finally he went still. The only sound was my own ragged breathing and the hum of the lights. Jonathan Harris was dead, and I had killed him. I knelt there over his lifeless body for a long moment. I expected to feel horror, maybe shame. A part of me did, the cop in me, the one who remembered that once I believed no one had the right to take a life. But another part of me felt a grim satisfaction. Justice, true justice, had finally been served. The courts wouldn't let this rapist suffer, so I made sure he did. My hands were shaking as I unwrapped the blue paracord from his neck. His blood had stained it in places. I stared at that rope, at its frayed fibres, and an idea came to me. This rope was part of me, part of my journey from cop to whatever I was now. I decided I would leave a piece of it with him. I cut a short length of the blue cord with my pocket knife and tied his wrists together tightly. It was a message, though I wasn't fully conscious of what message I meant yet. Perhaps a symbol that the blue had finally caught up with him, that the law he escaped would bind him in the end. Before I slipped away into the night, I reached into my wallet and pulled out a playing card, the Joker. I had grabbed it from an old deck at home, almost on a whim. Why a Joker? Maybe because Harris thought the law was a joke. Maybe because I felt like a trickster dealing out a wild card, something the city didn't expect. Or maybe, deep down, I knew I had become a fool of sorts, a jester dancing on the edge of sanity and morality. I placed the Joker card on his chest, the grinning clown face staring back at me in the dim light. Then I disappeared. I barely slept before my next shift. I remember standing in the precinct the next morning, hearing the call come in about a body found in a parking garage. I had to force myself to stay still, to not seem too interested. My captain assigned a couple of detectives to head over. I volunteered to join, feigning a casual curiosity. After all, I was a detective, and catching a new case early was part of the job. At the scene, I kept my face neutral as we beheld the corpse of Jonathan Harris, bound with blue rope, a Joker card on his chest. My colleagues were baffled. I remember one of them, Russo, muttering, "What kind of psycho does this?" I just clenched my jaw and pretended to be as puzzled as the rest. Inside, a cold flame flickered. I had done it. I had delivered justice, and no one had a clue. Harris was just the beginning. Once that door was opened, once I'd taken justice into my own hands, it became easier to step through it again. Not easy, exactly. It was never truly easy. But the barrier was broken. And somewhere inside, I felt a dark purpose blooming. I started making a list, quietly, carefully. A list of names that kept me up at night. Names of those who had escaped justice, people I knew to be guilty. Some I had arrested myself only to watch them walk. Others were cases I knew from colleagues or the news. New York City has no shortage of monsters wearing human faces. I became an investigator by day and a hunter by night. On duty, I played the model cop, all the while filing away information. Off duty, I became a phantom. The newspaper eventually dubbed me the Blue Joker after my calling cards, a moniker meant to mock, perhaps, but I took it in stride. Blue for the paracord, Joker for the card. A killer with a signature. I chose the names of my victims with meticulous care. Each one had hurt others and laughed in the face of consequence. A gang member who gunned down a little girl in a crossfire, freed when witnesses lost their nerve. Even the man who killed my partner, I tracked him down too. He begged for mercy in his final moments, but I had none left to give. A corrupt landlord who burned down his own building for insurance money, killing a family, and got off for lack of evidence. A trust fund kid who beat a homeless man to death for fun, only to dodge jail through family connections. Every time these people slipped away, the city lost a little more faith in justice. I aimed to change that equation, one corpse at a time. I tracked them, studied them, stalked them like prey. I became patient, methodical. Surveillance came naturally. I'd done plenty of stakeouts as a cop, and I knew how not to be seen. Weeks could pass as I observed a target's habits, waiting for the perfect moment. I became a creature of the shadows. The adrenaline of those nights was intoxicating in a way I'd never felt on the right side of the law. With each hunt, I honed my skills and steeled my heart. Every kill had to be up close and personal. I refused to use a gun. Too quick, too detached. They didn't deserve an easy exit, and a gunshot would draw attention I didn't want. Instead, I carried my blue paracord and a knife. The paracord I used to bind them, often their wrists or ankles, sometimes around their throats when I was ready to end it. The knife was a backup, rarely used except when a target proved stronger than expected. I tried to avoid gratuitous blood. I wasn't doing this to revel in gore. I did it to see the fear in their eyes when they realized they were finally facing consequences, to feel the last shuddering breath of a predator who'd preyed on the innocent. Those moments were horrifying and somehow gratifying. It sickens me how well I managed to compartmentalize my life. By day, I joked with colleagues at the precinct, pushed papers, solved cases, even genuinely helped people in need. By night, I was silent terror on two legs. After each kill, I left my signature, blue paracord binding the body, and a joker card on display. It was a message that their crimes had not been forgotten, that justice had a wild card to play after all. The media ate it up, turned my secret crusade into a citywide ghost story. The Blue Joker strikes again, blared the headlines after the third body was found in as many months. The city was in a panic, especially the ones who had reason to fear that joker card. I admit, I felt a twisted thrill reading those articles in the morning paper as I sipped my coffee in the precinct bullpen. My colleagues speculated endlessly about who this killer could be, what his motive was. Some thought it was a deranged maniac with a fetish for clowns and cops. Others thought it was some kind of vigilante, given the victim's rap sheets. I remember sitting quietly during these debates, biting my tongue to hide any tell. Inside, I felt a grim vindication. The world finally made sense in those moments, seeing those bastards in the obits instead of on the streets. Yet it was never about the fame or the name. I wasn't the Riddler leaving puzzles for Batman. I wasn't even the Joker despite the card. I had no interest in taunting, only in the act of removal. The card and rope were symbols, yes, but also practical in a way. They linked the cases, so everyone knew these deaths were not isolated incidents of random violence. They were connected, a pattern the public and police couldn't ignore. And I wanted them to know. Part of me wanted the city to feel it, to sense that someone out there was balancing the scales. I often wonder now, in this moment of honesty, how I managed to keep the Blue Joker separate from Detective Eric Vega. It was a dangerous game. After the first few kills, the department formed a task force. Imagine that, I ended up on the task force hunting myself. They wanted my insight, given my years of experience and, ironically, my apparent dedication to justice. I helped construct a profile of the killer. It was surreal, describing myself in third person. Likely a white or Hispanic male in his 30s or 40s, probably with law enforcement or military background due to the tactical precision and the knots used. I remember saying that while colleagues nodded, thinking I was so clever. I was practically confessing, but of course they saw it as expert analysis. Those meetings were nerve-wracking despite my outward calm. I had to be careful with every word, every reaction. I made sure to never be the one to volunteer to check a scene of my own doing too eagerly, nor to avoid it too much either. I had to appear naturally curious, but not obsessed. Inside, every second of it was a tightrope walk over the abyss. A single slip, an inconsistent remark, a flinch at the wrong time, a piece of evidence I failed to erase, and my life would be over. I thought I was doing well. In fact, I know I was. I had them stumped for years. They had theories, but no suspects that stuck. The idea that it could be one of their own was too unthinkable for most. Only one person ever looked at me with a glimmer of suspicion, Captain Alvarez. She had this way of peering at you, like she could see secrets. One late night after the fourth victim, that was the slumlord who torched his building, she caught me alone in the locker room. I must have been lost in thought because I flinched when she spoke. All she said was, "Hell of a case, isn't it, Vega?" But her eyes, I felt like she could see the blood on my hands. I mumbled something about trusting we'll catch the guy, and hurried out. I think that was the first time I felt real fear of being caught. But Alvarez never said or did anything overt. Maybe it was just my guilty conscience projecting onto her gaze. And yes, I did feel guilt. I'm not completely numb, especially on the nights after. I would go home, scrub the scent of death off me in a scalding shower, and sometimes I'd just stand there shaking. I'd see Daniel's face, or Elena's, or that little girl Maria. I'd tell myself it was for them, that I was avenging the innocent. It helped me sleep, most of the time. On the worst nights, though, I'd see the faces of the ones I killed, twisted in fear, in pain. The ghosts of my prey visited me in dreams, not to haunt or scold, but just there, staring. I don't know if it was guilt or just the weight of memory. I tried to ignore it either way, drowning it in whiskey or burying myself in more work. Each time doubt crept in, I reminded myself of what I'd seen in 2 decades on the force. The scales were tipped far in favor of evil. I truly believed I was tipping them back. Maybe I was, for a while. But eventually, every balancing act falters. They say pride comes before the fall. In my case, pride and anger did me in. After years of careful kills, of seeing myself as an instrument of righteous vengeance, I got sloppy. Or maybe it was inevitable. Even the smartest criminals slip up eventually. My mistake was Michael Connolly. Michael Connolly was a name that had been on my list from the start, but I hadn't been able to get to him. He was a small-time con artist and burglar who one night broke into a home in Queens. A father confronted him, and Connolly panicked and beat the man into a coma. The victim died 2 days later. Connolly was caught with the man's blood on his jacket. It should have put him away for life. But some hotshot lawyer exploited a chain of custody error with the blood evidence. The jury acquitted. I remember seeing Connolly smirk as he walked out, free as a bird. That was years ago. He'd been laying low since, and I hadn't forgotten him. I finally tracked Connolly down to a dingy bar he frequented on the Lower East Side. He had grown a beard, put on weight, maybe trying to disguise himself from anyone who remembered his crime. But I never forgot his eyes. Predators have the same eyes, and I can spot them a mile away now. I watched him for a couple of nights, planning to make him my next mark. On a moonless night, I saw my chance. Connolly stumbled out of the bar, drunk, heading down a lonely street toward his apartment. Perfect. I followed silently. We passed under a broken streetlight, enveloped in darkness, and I moved in. I pressed my knife to his lower back and hissed, "Don't make a sound." I expected compliance. A drunk coward would freeze. But Connolly was more flight than fight. He bolted forward, twisting away, and the knife sliced his side. Not a deep wound, but enough to make him yelp and run. My heart leapt into my throat. This wasn't going as cleanly as the others. I couldn't let him get away, not now, not after all my patience. I gave chase down the alley. He was drunk and hurt, but desperation fueled him. In his panic, he knocked over a trash can, clattering loudly. I cursed under my breath. I had always been so careful about noise, about being swift and silent. Now here I was, in a foot race in the open. He cut through a backlot and I followed, my legs pumping, sweat dripping. I felt a surge of rage, at him for running, at myself for underestimating him. I tackled Connolly near a chain-link fence. We went down hard, wrestling. He was heavier than me and frantic. He swung wildly and actually clipped my jaw, making my head ring. Red haze filled my vision. I slammed his head into the concrete, stunning him. In the struggle, I lost my grip on my knife, but I had the paracord. I looped it around his neck as he writhed, and I pulled, channeling all my frustration into it. He gagged and thrashed. His nails scrabbled at my arms. In our violent dance, we knocked against the fence. I heard a dog barking nearby, too damn loud. Panic flared. I needed to finish this and get out. With a snarl, I twisted the garrote. Finally, Connolly went limp. I knelt there, chest heaving. That's when I heard it, a voice calling out from a window above, "Hey, what's going on down there?" A light flickered on, illuminating the end of the alley. Damn it. A witness. I dragged Connolly's body deeper into the shadows, my mind racing. This was a first. I'd never had anyone even come close to witnessing my acts before. In a rush, I bound Connolly's wrists with the cord and fished for a joker card. My hands were trembling. I dropped the card twice before placing it by his body. I should have taken more time, checked the surroundings, but fear had sunk its claws into me. All I could think was to get out of there fast. I fled into the night, heart hammering, leaving Connolly's corpse in the alley. By the time I got home, I was a mess. My jaw ached where he'd hit me. In the bathroom mirror, under the harsh light, I saw a small streak of blood on my neck, not mine, his. Connolly had scratched me. I felt sick. It wasn't just the close call or the physical pain. It was something deeper, a gnawing doubt that I'd made a terrible mistake. The next day, the news came down. The Blue Joker had struck again, but something was different. My stomach dropped as I listened to the report. Michael Connolly, found dead. But as the details emerged, my blood ran cold. Connolly, it turned out, hadn't actually been guilty of the murder he was acquitted of. The real killer, another burglar, had confessed to a priest on his deathbed a year after the trial. The confession came to light only recently, clearing Connolly's name officially. He was trying to turn his life around, some said, burdened by guilt that an innocent family man died even though it wasn't truly his fault. I stood there, hearing this on TV in the precinct, feeling the room tilt around me. In that moment I realized I had truly, irrevocably become the very thing I hated. I had killed an innocent man. God, I killed an innocent man. All my careful justifications, all my rules about choosing deserving targets, it all shattered like glass. I wasn't a hero. I wasn't a vigilante bringing balance. I was just a murderer. A cold-blooded murderer who was so consumed by arrogance and rage that I didn't even bother to confirm what I thought I knew. I think something in me broke the day Connolly's innocence was revealed. I managed to maintain my facade at work. I had to. If I suddenly fell apart, my comrades might notice. But inside, a storm was raging. Guilt, horror, self-loathing like I'd never felt before. I'd justified the nightmares before. The faces that visited me in sleep were monsters who deserved it, I'd tell myself. Now Daniel's face was there, Elena's, but also Harris's bulging eyes, Ortiz's twisted sneer, and Connolly's silent, reproachful stare. The dead all gathered around my bed every time I closed my eyes, and I had no words to defend myself anymore. I started slipping up in little ways. Drinking more, missing minor details on cases. Alvarez, sharp as ever, asked if I was okay. I lied that I was just tired. She frowned. I knew she sensed something, but what could she prove? Still, I felt the noose tightening. Not just guilt, but real suspicion now. That witness who shouted from the window during Connolly's murder had seen only a silhouette, but he mentioned hearing the killer grunt in pain and a dog barking at 2:30 a.m. That narrowed the time window and possible suspects a bit. Our task force discussed it, and I had to endure that meeting with my heart in my throat. We knew the killer likely got injured, or at least hit during the struggle. I had a bruise on my jaw, but I played it off as having slipped in the shower. Forensic teams also finally caught a break. In my haste, I'd lost my knife in that alley. They recovered it. It was a generic tactical knife, nothing that could be traced directly to me, but forensics pulled a partial print. It wasn't a clear match to anyone yet, but they were confident they'd get there. I remember sitting at my desk when I heard the tech say, "We might finally have something." I knew it was only a matter of time before they connected the dots. My print was on file, of course. Every cop's is. Maybe I wiped the knife enough that it wasn't obvious, but with each passing day my paranoia grew. I started seeing the way people looked at me. Was it suspicion? Did they know? Or was I imagining it? The internal affairs team started quietly interviewing everyone on the task force. Standard procedure when a case drags on too long with no leads. Check if maybe the killer was closer than we thought. I sat through my interview sweating bullets inside, even as I maintained a calm front and answered every question. I could tell they had nothing concrete, but I felt cracks forming in the walls around me. That brings me to tonight. The storm outside, it's fitting. I always imagined judgment would come on a night like this, with thunder rattling the windows like the wrath of God. I know the cops are coming for me. Maybe Alvarez finally put it together, or the print came back, or maybe it's just that my luck has run out. I've been listening to the scanner. I heard the APB go out on my car, on me. They know. I'm sitting here in my old apartment, the one I grew up in after my mom passed it down to me. Funny, I never left the city. I always felt married to it, for better or worse. The lights are off. I prefer it this way. Just the red blink of this recorder and the occasional flash of lightning through the curtains. The shadows feel like company or judgment. Perhaps both. I'm recording this because the world needs to know why. Not to justify. I know nothing can truly justify what I've done, but to explain. Maybe someone will hear it and understand the corruption and rot that can turn a good man into a monster. Or maybe I'm just doing this for myself, to unburden what's left of my soul in these final moments. They're coming. I can feel the vibration of approaching footsteps even before they reach my door. SWAT by the sound of it, They won't take chances with the Blue Joker. Ironic, isn't it? The police finally hunting me with all the determination I once hunted others. I won't give them the satisfaction of a trial, of parading me in cuffs like some trophy. No, this ends on my terms. To the detectives who will eventually hear this, I'm sorry. Some of you were my friends, my family in blue. I'm sorry I lied to you. I'm sorry I betrayed the badge. To Daniel's widow, I'm sorry. I failed to honor his memory. I thought I was doing what had to be done, but I see now that I became the very thing I hated. In trying to fight monsters, I lost my own humanity. The system broke me, yes, but I made the choice to do what I did. That choice will haunt me beyond the grave, if there is anything after this. Tell Alina that Jonathan Harris won't ever hurt her or anyone again. Tell Maria's mother that Luis Ortiz met justice in the end. I don't know if that brings any comfort. It shouldn't. Nothing about this is comforting or righteous now. It's just tragedy all around. I used to think of myself as a necessary evil, but evil is evil, necessary or not. Maybe that's the final joke, that I became a clownish caricature of justice, a joker indeed. The blue rope, the playing card. What a damn farce. What a fool I am. They're here. I can hear Captain Alvarez shouting my name, ordering me to come out. Poor Alma. She deserved better from me. This is my last chance to do something good, or at least to do one less bad thing. I won't make them shoot me, and I won't live to stand in a courtroom to be dissected and condemned. I condemn myself right here, right now. To whoever finds this tape, do better than I did. Fix the system, or at least don't lose yourself to it. Monsters are real. I know, because I became one. Justice is supposed to protect the innocent, but sometimes it creates monsters instead. Eric Vega's name was buried along with his crimes, his legacy whispered about only in shadows. And tonight, somewhere in the city he tried to save, another crack just formed in the thin blue line. When the shield breaks, the monster steps through.
Every story has an end, but here, the mysteries never stop. Thank you for watching and being a part of this journey into the unknown. Your support keeps these stories alive, and there's plenty more waiting for you. We drop 3 new stories every week, so if you crave suspense, the unexplained and the downright chilling, make sure you're subscribed and ready for what's next. Until then, keep your lights on, your doors locked, and remember, some stories stay with you long after they're told.